Okay, stand by.
And now it's time for the official Bogus News on The Rock. A seething summary of non-events stolen from the wires of Acid Flashback Press. With your investigative reporter, Fredrick J. Snakeskin.
This is the limited experimental late night edition, so stand by. In a real-life chiller more terrifying than Alfred Hitchcock's classic film thriller, The Birds, a New York couple was forced to flee their home when it became the breeding nest for thousands of female bats. And the bat invasion that drove Lorraine and Steve Disberger from their home may well just be the tip of the iceberg for the residents of New London, a normally peaceful village on the old Erie Canal. They're starting to take over the neighborhood, said Lorraine, whose abandoned home is infested with more than 2,000 of the loathsome flying creatures. If this keeps up, everyone will be gone, Steve added. The bats will take over, and this will just become Bat City. That's what he says. In other news of domestic harmony, heart-sick housewife Antonia Fair was so shattered to learn that her handsome hubby Clement was cheating on her that she leaped from a window to commit suicide, but crashed down on creepy Clement, killing him instead. The shaken lady survived her 4-story plunge with nothing but cuts, bruises, and a broken wrist. In some ways, this is truly poetic justice. Antonina's attorney, František Smetana, told reporters in Prague, Czechoslovakia. Her husband was the villain in the situation, and by a 1,000,000-to-1 coincidence, he was the one who paid for it with his life. Anguished Antonina, 38, was charged with recklessly causing her wayward mate's death, but sympathetic prosecutors eventually dismissed the charge. They've decided she suffered enough. Oh, and 9 months after a preacher's wife prophesied the coming of a devastating tornado, a dozen believers are still huddled in church waiting. "We will stay here until the tornado comes," said the Reverend M.L. Sims of Gary, Indiana. "God will take care of it all," he added. It was Sims' wife, Annie, who touched off the vigil by predicting last December that a tornado would strike on January 3rd, and then when that date passed with no sign of the storm, Mrs. Sims predicted that the tornado would arrive on January 24th. Even though the tornado didn't strike then, the 17 people who moved into the repairer of the breached Church of God in Christ to wait for the storm kept waiting. Sims said God decided to delay the twister so more people would know it was coming. Over the months, 5 people have left the church, some after relatives secured court orders to remove them. But the Reverend Sims says he, his wife, and 10 members of his flock will stay in the church until the twister hits, no matter how long it takes. And, oh yes, and finally, ladies and gentlemen, from the official KROQ Don't Try This at Home department, fat-fried hamburgers appear to be the latest weapon in the war on cancer. Michael Pariza, director of the University of Wisconsin's Food Research Institute, found in a study that frying hamburgers in their own fat caused a chemical change in a key burger ingredient, a certain polyunsaturated fat, and when the expert isolated the fat and fed it to lab rats, it greatly reduced the incidence of stomach and skin cancers contracted by the animals. Nobody knows how or why this miracle fat combats cancer, but Pariza and his research team have promised to make an intensive effort to find out. Right.
What I'm trying to say here is that the mass communications media could perform a tremendous public service by developing a code of ethics which says they will not give expensive airtime to stories which will obviously promote a fascinating interest in human depravity and debauchery.
And now it's time for the official Bogus News on The Rock. A collection of news about weird manifestations of animal behavior, strange lights in the sky, and the lives of ordinary, everyday working people like you and me. With your investigative reporter, Fredrick J. Snakeskin.
I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, looks pretty thin tonight. A magician accidentally made his right leg disappear when he fired a slug from a high-powered pistol into a refrigerator full of dynamite. Magician Johann Hansler was preparing for a tour of the country that was to include performances on Saturday Night Live and The Tonight Show when the bizarre mishap occurred. Hansler and his partner in the act they called Too Much Brothers were staying on a ranch near Santa Fe, New Mexico at the time of the tragedy. Hansler said he'd gone out target shooting with a .357 Magnum. The magician fired the gun at what he thought was an abandoned refrigerator. Unfortunately, the refrigerator was packed with dynamite stored there by a construction company, and it exploded, maiming the magician. Hansler's right leg was amputated above the knee after the accident. Oh, and this headline says, magician's leg vanishes after bizarre mishap. It didn't vanish. They cut it off. That's the letdown there, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Oh, this is a tasteful story. Girls' nature camp was for the birds and the bees. It says here, Swedish authorities said 3 girls were found wandering in the wilderness after they fled from a summer camp where they were held prisoner by sex fiends. It's the most disgusting thing I've ever come across, said prosecutor Staffan Soderberg, after a police search of the summer camp located 130 miles west of Stockholm turned up hundreds of nude teens along with an assortment of whips and dog leashes. Soderberg said the 3 girls, a 13-year-old and 11-year-old twins, enrolled in the summer camp that was advertised as being for girls who are, quote, interested in animals and nature, unquote. Authorities arrested the 60-year-old camp director and 3 women in their 30s. So there. Oh, and finally, in the news, Art Cagle isn't joking when he says he was kidnapped by space aliens and whisked to Pluto aboard a cigar-shaped UFO. It must be hard for anyone to believe, the 67-year-old retiree from Huntsville, Alabama, unwittingly told the Bogus News. It's sometimes hard for me to believe, but I do. I was there. Cagle says he was lying in a hospital bed recovering from open-heart surgery and was looking forward to early dismissal. He was completely awake, drug-free, when he suddenly felt himself rising from the bed. My body was still in bed, but my spirit went into the spaceship, he explained, to no one in particular. A 5-foot-tall, gray, lizard-skinned alien named Cliff telepathically introduced himself and told Cagle he was being taken to Pluto for experiments. Cliff was at least a foot taller than the other aliens, Cagle recalled. He kept reassuring me that I was safe and would be returned unharmed. The aliens were humanoid. They had arms, legs, ears, and almond-shaped eyes. There was a gadget in the spaceship that looked like an X-ray machine. It was some sort of computer, said Cagle. They called it a molecular transporter. They were interested in my genes. He added, I told them I was nothing special. I just sold insurance. They said they didn't care. My name came up on their computer, and they wanted me. Pluto, I don't know if you knew this or not, Pluto was a tropical paradise. There are no animals, not even insects, just happy-go-lucky Plutonians who work in clean, high-tech factories and drive jeeps powered by compressed hydrogen cubes, according to Cagle. And the Plutonians cast 2 shadows, while his spirit cast only 1. He believes it may have to do with a giant mirror that the aliens installed in orbit to heat up the planet. Cagle said he was given a shot in the elbow before he left Pluto. They said they could find me anytime they wanted, recalled the old-timer. I keep hoping they'll come back, but next time I want to take my wife, too. Cagle woke up in his hospital bed unharmed with an incredible story to tell willing listeners. And I assumed you are, because you haven't tuned out yet.
This is the city, Los Angeles, California. In the 1890s, freight and passenger travel from the San Fernando Valley to the Los Angeles plain came by wagon over the Cahuenga Pass. 30 years later, hundreds of automobiles turned out for the opening of the Mulholland Highway, bumper to bumper, a hint of the future.
Don't get on that highway. It's a cookbook.
Yes, isn't he a screamer?
This is the highly experimental edition.
And now it's time for the official Bogus News on the Rock. From the sewers of Venice to the smegma farms of Pasadena, from the burning sands to the churning glands. Here's all the facts you need to live with your investigative reporter, Fredrick J. Snakeskin.
Yes, this is very exciting news, ladies and gentlemen. A previously poor cattle rancher has been letting his herd graze aimlessly ever since he discovered that doing so causes the animals to develop gallstones. That's right. The seemingly bizarre practice has made farmer Raul Sanchez a rich man for every time he finds a gallstone in a slaughtered cow. He comes into money. A year ago, Raul, 51, was deep in debt and one more missed payment away from losing his 200-acre spread outside Sigüenza, Spain. Now his fortune is estimated at $1 million and growing. I owe it all to my cows and their gallstones. He says he was devastated the first time he slaughtered one of his heifers and found a stone the size of a hen's egg in the cow's gallbladder. The next day, however, he picked the winning number in a whopping lottery jackpot worth the equivalent of $160,000. Though Raul was thrilled when he was able to save his ranch from being seized by the bank, the thought never crossed his mind that his cow's gallstone might have had something to do with it. Instead, he was worried that the rest of his 400-head herd might be likewise afflicted, but when a lawyer called with the unexpected news that he had inherited the equivalent of some $650,000 from a long-lost uncle the day after he found a second gallstone in another slaughtered cow, Raul began to wonder. He butchered 6 more cattle over the next few weeks before locating another gallstone, and the next day he was cleaning out some cupboards when he came across a jar of old coins valued at more than $50,000. At that point, I did some checking and learned that cows that eat a lot of roughage are prone to produce gallstones, Raul says. Now I let my herd graze and eat whatever they want, and I find a gallstone in every 3rd or 4th cow I slaughter. To add to the divorced rancher's bonanza, he has been offered $7,500 a pound for his cow's dried gallstones from a pharmaceutical company that uses them in the manufacture of medicines. At present, his collection is worth approximately $80,000. There's a line of reasoning to that story. You just have to look very deep for it. In other equally important news, 2 brothers who harmonized on a duet of Singing in the Rain were slammed into jail by their audience. To the dismay of singers Terry Gordon, 27, and Warren Gordon, 25, the audience was composed of police officers in Oklahoma City. The officers picked up the Gordons on a radio frequency used by the MK&T Railroad Company, talked them into singing the song, and then followed the music to their apartment. 2 handheld radios stolen from MK&T were retrieved, and the Gordon brothers were jailed and charged with concealing stolen property. Locked in an empty basement for almost 2 weeks with no one around for miles, a woman desperate to stay alive chewed her fingernails down to nothing before she was finally rescued. I don't know if there's any nutritional value there either. Don't try that at home. And finally, Mr. Conscience, a retired man who apparently has nothing better to do than take it upon himself to lurk around supermarkets waiting to scold people who sample free food, is a self-appointed one-man vigilante squad. Henry Heaton hangs out at several stores in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, mostly at the produce counters and bulk food sections where folks who just can't resist helping themselves are most prevalent. When Heaton spots someone stealing food, whether the person is merely sampling a grape or a cherry, or shamelessly nibbling and snacking his or her way through the store, he pounces. I tell them they're stealing, he says, explaining, they think I mean that they're stealing from the store, but they're really stealing from me because the next time I go in the store, the prices are up because they're running up losses for this pilferage, and it's all built into the markup. So when a shopper dips into a bun bin for a free bite, Heaton takes it personally. That's all there is.
You're free as a roaring tide, and there's no need to hide.
Slow news day, ladies and gentlemen. Or could you tell just by listening? You're listening to KROQ-FM, L.A. and Orange County's new music leader at 106.7 FM, the world-famous KROQ.
KROQ.
I'm Ed the Carpenter, and I'm not banging down somebody's walls. I'm listening to KROQ.
I guess that would be the direction to go when you're tumbling, ladies and gentlemen. Tumbling Down by Ziggy Marley and the Melody Makers here on good old KROQ. And congratulations to Jeff Stahl from L.A., by the way, who won that Ziggy video a little while ago. More stuff to give away having to do with people named Ziggy and Iggy coming up later. Right before tumbling down, you got to listen to Kids in America, some vintage material from Kim Wilde, and you know how she's listed in the phone book. And that was preceded by I'm Sorry from Hot House Flowers. Oh, L'Amour from Erasure was right before that. Intoxication by Shriekback. And you also heard Take My Heart Away by Johnny Clegg. Y'all, I'm Freddy Snakeskin. Y'all, I got more.
All right, class, quiet!
All right, pay particular close attention, ladies and gentlemen.
And now it's time for the official Bogus News on the Rock. A concise roundup of all knowledge accumulated throughout human history with your investigative reporter, Fredrick J. Snakeskin.
Yes, and this is the experimental late-night edition, ladies and gentlemen. Just practicing till I get it right. And continued from last night, docs remove apricot from woman's stomach, say experts. A 61-year-old woman underwent emergency surgery after a dried apricot snack swelled like a balloon in her stomach. Surgeons at Walton Hospital in Liverpool, Englandia, said that the apricot, as you were, caused a painful blockage and might have killed the woman if it hadn't been removed properly. At first, the patient denied having eaten an apricot, but then she remembered that her daughter, a health food fan, had given her some dried fruit as a snack 3 days earlier. Doctors said the dried fruit absorbs stomach juices when swallowed and can revert to its original size within a day or two. Quote, we felt like Jack Horner. We stuck in a thumb, but instead of a plum, we found this large apricot, said one humorous doctor. We suggest retailers of dried fruit should display a health warning sign saying not to be swallowed whole. Did Jesus eat ice cream? Yes, expert says. A noted scholar claims there's evidence to suggest that one of the earliest dignitaries to enjoy the treat we now call ice cream was none other than Jesus Christ. British historian Henry Leadsworthy said Jesus loved ice cream, which in his time was known by a Hebrew term that translates loosely to milk ice. Leadsworthy contends that the Holy Prophet ate ice cream both for pleasure and to aid in digestion, and suggests the frozen treat may even have been served at the Last Supper, experts say. Hopefully none of the visitors in Seoul who are staying in the new Olympic Village apartment buildings are being offended by the graphic, explicit instructions posted next to the toilets on how to go about depositing one's waste in a toilet. They're aimed mainly at the local residents who will occupy the apartment units after the games. Many are accustomed to the Oriental-style hole squatting and thus have a powerful urge to stand on the seats. At least 2 elderly women have fallen and broken their arms. Authorities in West Berlin say 51-year-old Johannes Stein shot himself in remorse and sorrow over his canary's death, caused when Stein left a glass of wine out and the bird started tippling and wound up getting into it too deeply. Stein discovered Hansi the canary dead of drowning in the wine. His wife says Hansi must have tried to drink and lost his balance. She says her husband often threatened to kill himself if anything happened to the bird. At last report, Stein was recovering after emergency surgery. And there's one other item here, I think. Yeah, I'm sure there is. An outraged mother, Mrs. Angela Davis, no relation to the noted communist educator, says, I could not believe my eyes when I saw the homework questions. A homework sheet given to 25 English students at Dinnington Comprehensive School near Rotherham, England, included an exercise with these directions. Quote, write a clear set of instructions for how to strangle yourself with a tie. Deputy Principal Stephen Faulkner said the exercise had been photocopied from a widely used textbook and was designed to get the pupils to describe the process in sequence form. He admitted it fails lamentably and offered his sincere apologies. Experts reveal.
Mister, I'm feeling so good this morning.
Stand by. The experimental edition is next.
And now, it's time for the official Bogus News on the Rock. A pointless collection of exaggerations, distortions, half-truths, myths, and outright lies. Gathered from the KROQ news bureaus all over the station. With our investigative reporter, Fredrick J. Snakeskin.
This just handed me. Cops freak out when leg floats by in river. A young man was so cool about losing his leg while tubing in the rapids of a dangerous creek, he didn't bother to tell anyone. because it was artificial. No, the leg, not the creek. He said it was his goofing around leg, and there were plenty more where that came from, said Boulder, Colorado Sheriff's Detective Russ Naney. Worried deputies had been called to the base of Boulder Falls a few days earlier when someone spotted the leg floating in the creek. They feared a crazed killer might be stalking the area because 2 fingers had been discovered in an abandoned cabin in nearby Puzzler Mine a week earlier. When they realized the leg was a prosthesis, worried deputies and firemen searched the area for a one-legged person who may have been stranded or hurt, but they didn't find anyone. After reading news accounts of the incredible discovery, a woman called deputies and said the leg belonged to her 19-year-old brother. The guy said he had been tubing in Boulder Creek a month earlier and stepped into swift water that took his leg off, said Naney. He didn't bother to report it because because it was his goofing around leg, quote unquote, that he used for rough activities, said Naney. As for the fingers found in the cabin, deputies believe they may have been stored there in a bottle for 50 to 100 years. Wild boar, a pig hit at croquet. An old folks croquet game ended in bedlam when the croquet court was invaded by a wild boar. No, this is not a story about poor man. This beady-eyed beast was being chased by a hunter in central Japan when it stormed onto the court where 17 elderly men were bouncing wooden balls around. 4 men were slightly injured before the oldsters managed to beat the boar back with croquet mallets. Principal jailed for sneaking dirty pics of students. A sleazy school principal learned his lesson the hard way. Is this editorializing? I'm sorry. When he was sentenced to 8 years behind bars for taking dirty pictures of his students, Lauren Ebersole, a respected they called him sleazy in the other paragraph, a respected 56-year-old educator before his arrest in Fresno, California, pleaded no contest to 11 felony and 17 misdemeanor charges in the shocking case. Prosecutor T. Worthington Vogel said Ebersole photographed and videotaped 24 girls between the ages of 8 and 12 at 2 elementary schools where he was principal during a 3-year period. The photos were taken in Ebersole's offices and in the gym after he got the victims to disrobe under the guise of trying on cheerleading uniforms, the prosecutor said, to no one in particular. Oh, in other education news, this item, 13-year-old Renata Silvestri was so ashamed of her poor exam results in Carre, Italy, that she fled to her attic bedroom and hid there for 13 years. She could not even face her parents, who simply left food at her door. Now, 26 years old, she's recovering in a hospital. When police finally paid a visit to her room, they found her with waist-length hair, 7-inch fingernails, and wearing only a tattered bedsheet. On the positive side, she didn't have a wooden leg to lose. Oh, I'm sorry. She wouldn't have to go back to school. That's on the positive side.
Well, such is the end of the hippie trail. And thousands of our young people are on that trail today.
That's all I ever do.
And now it's time for the official Bogus News on the Rock. A collection of inane trivia no other so-called radio stations will even touch. With your investigative reporter, Fredrick J. Snakeskin.
And thank you, Buster Hyman, for that resounding vote of confidence. This is the experimental edition, late night. In the news tonight, Flash. Jennifer Kelly from Los Angeles wins skinny puppy tickets on KROQ. Yes, it just happened. So congratulations, Jennifer. In other news, gold fireman. Anyway, that's what he said.
If only we could keep this insidious stuff off the air.
I'm not sure that I agree with you. What purpose would that serve?
Well, the people wouldn't have to listen to it.
It's for me to leave this island somehow and as quickly as possible. Or this great scientific work you've been doing will stop.
How about here? How about over here? How about over here? You liked it better over here, though, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
This is fine. Is this great right here? No, I don't want fine. Is it great? I'm nice to know that it's great. I want to go over here, though, in case I can get over this area right here, but thank you. Okay, I'm talking, how about over here?
I am a Buddhist. In case of accident, call a lama.
This is the city, Los Angeles, California. Critics once called it a cultural desert. a city of sun-baked people and half-baked ideas.
I'm going
The
to shock
Civic
you.
Center is helping to modify that image. In Los Angeles, ideas are big business. For some, the stranger, the better.
There's a discount on our
As a rule,
railway plan.
new ideas don't stay new for very long here. They grow big, but sooner rather than later, they all disappear.